we're going to go through the procedures that are going to be needed to be carried out to add a client to our database. Now, adding a client in many ways is very straightforward, but it illustrates some of the interesting techniques that we've developed as we've gone through the application development. We've got to remember what a client is. You may remember from our class hierarchy diagrams that we start off with a base class which deals with people, and we called that the person class. Now, the person class contains the essential information that we would want to know about any person. So all people would be having this information as a kind of core of the data we store about them. We then extend these information points into the different types of information we might want to store about different types of people or persons. So we store information about staff, which is going to be their salary, their job title and their extension number. And we also will store information about clients, their account number, their address line and so forth, so we can write to them. Now, all of these are derived, these client and staff ones are derived from class person. So client inherits from person, and therefore a client can act like a person, and any methods in the person class will be available to the client class. Any data fields in the person will be available to the client class. So you've got inheritance, and because of this inheritance, a client can behave like a person, and that's the polymorphism. Now, in order to keep the data to get the data into the database, we're going to use a person DB class. We could have a client DB and a staff DB, but the one person class is going to be easy to use and might allow us to share some of the code that we create. So we put this person DB class in place, and let's just briefly go through it. You don't need to go through it line by painful line, but just in skipping over it so you understand what's happening. The person DB class has two potential methods, add client, and as you'll see there's another method for add staff. Now, the add client method uses a connection which has been obtained from the estate agency DB class to connect to the database, get connection, or to make it available to connect. We're going to use a SQL string which says insert into person into these fields which are in parentheses, these values which we'll give you when we have them. Now, these are parameters, and they're symbolized by the @ symbol, which indicates that we're going to supply the data when we run the statement. Now, we're going to run the statement using a SQL command, and the SQL command is here. Try and highlight them from this side. And then the insert statements are here. So add with value whatever we give it when we run it. Now, here's the other interesting sequence, and this is what I wanted really to show you in this method rather than anything else. The rest of it's kind of just essentially what you've seen before. If we don't have an address line, our database designed a situation where that could be null in the database diagram, so we have to be able to store a null value. Or, if we're given a value, we store the value we're given, and the value we're given will be in the text box on the form. So it says if the address line is the zero string, or the zero length string, insert parameters, add with value, just like here, in the field address line 1, the DBNull.Value. Now that's what I really wanted to show you. That's the whole point of this procedure, is that line there. Do that for all of the fields which can be null, and we're storing a complete record for each client. Now, what we do when we go down here is there's another method here, add staff, but I haven't done it. Why would I do it? You've got enough information here to understand what would happen. So we've got the try, catch, and finally regime again. Open the connection, execute the insert command, using the select statement that we designed above and insert the stuff. And then what we do is we get the person's ID back. That's really useful when one operation depends on another. And if you remember, the objects are related to each other through their IDs. So once we've got an ID, we might be able to pass this value onto a different form or a different method. We don't in this case, but it's a really good way of getting the ID immediately after you have entered the record with this statement. So we get the value of the new ID that's been created by the auto number sequence in the code that was created on the database. If it fails, throw an exception. If it's gone, and remember this finally, it's gone this far, the finally will run and it closes the connection. Let's look at the form design. Now the form design is very straightforward, but it has a couple of interesting things that you might want to be able to describe in one of your essays. Notice that I have taken care to align all of the edges and make it look professional. These are essential values which are not allowed to be null. So we give the user who's going to enter the data into the form a visual clue to say that this information is required. Coloured background, which may change, for example, if you put data in, and an asterisk. A key there, and that's where we'll show the record ID once it's been entered. So no, that links to the type of person that we have. I meant to say that. So here's the code behind. Validator class. All of these must be true, or the valid data isn't valid. It will return false. That's all the data that's not allowed to be null. Put the client data. Now we're getting the type of person ID from that little text box I just showed you. And then all of the data is going to be harvested and put into a client class like this. So the first name comes from that control there and is put into that member of the client class. Now the button click's very straightforward. Add the client. If it's valid data, if all of the essential elements are there, we can add records safely. And then just do the adding as we've seen before. Try catch, but no finally, because we're not closing a connection, because that's all managed by the other class. Else, show this message to the user. Now this is saying that it didn't meet the isValidData test. So something that should be in there is missing. A couple of other methods in here. The initialize method, the close method on the menu strip, and here's a little local piece of private code. So the scope of this is private. It's only going to work inside this form. And it's the clear form. And the reason that we have that is that you may want to enter more than one record at once. So after the entry of the record, which is there, we ask the user, do you want to add another one? And that's how you create a message box that shows a question. That's the title on the message box, and it gives a message box buttons yes, no option, and we're checking to see if it's yes that's clicked. If yes is clicked, clear client form and set the focus to the first control. That means that the little blinking cursor will be in the first name text box. Otherwise, just close the form because we don't need it. So the logic is pretty clear, and I hope you understand exactly what's happening in this operation. You've seen it all before, but the DBNull is new, I think, so you need to be that just needed to be reinforced a little bit.